False equivalencies and false dilemmas lead to us quite often mistaking opinions for ethics. As I discovered once again just getting here this morning, life is complicated. Example from my own experience. True story, but I'm going to summarize, so I'm not naming anybody specifically. A Unitarian Universalist congregation opens its church building to community partners that share its mission and uphold UU values. Some of these groups and organizations use space once a week. Some use their space once a month. Eventually, a major partnership with an LGBTQ organization arises, and the queer nonprofit begins using 3 large rooms in the church building for office and meeting space. They hold multiple meetings a week, their board meets once a month, and they hold monthly events and maintain regular office hours 3 days a week. Like other groups using space in the church, the congregation does not ask them to rent because all of their work is in direct support of the congregation's mission and the Unitarian Universalist Association values. But the first quarter of the fiscal year after the queer nonprofit begins using space in the building, heating costs are up 60% and electric costs nearly as much. When the treasurer of the congregation brings this up at a board meeting, the board quickly agrees to ask the queer nonprofit to start paying rent to take care of the utilities. Later, the property chairperson hears this and they tell the board member, it's not just them. This building is used more all the time lately. We have coffee house concerts now on a regular basis. We have a lot of church events in the building over the last 3 months. Sunday mornings are lasting longer. We're getting more visitors. There's been more social things, potlucks, a Halloween party, a Thanksgiving dinner. The Christmas fair this year was a lot bigger and people were in here a lot more often working to prepare it and set it up and break it down. Having our queer friends in the building has certainly helped drive our costs up, but the increase in our bills isn't due just to their using the building. It's due to our use too. The next month at the board meeting, the board starts discussing how to find out what it actually does cost to keep the building open and heated and the lights on for so many hours, for a week, for a month, so that they know how much of that cost is related to church activity and how much to partners sharing the building. So they can ask people in a fair and just way to contribute to keeping the place open. Everything is complicated once you do a little thinking. You look just a little beneath the surface with even the bare minimum of critical thinking, and you can uncover complexities you can't even believe someone missed at first glance. And I would bet that most of us find this incredibly annoying most of the time. Life being complex can be a real pain in the butt. You can find yourself sitting in traffic wondering why there's no accident, there's no construction, and you're going to be late for work, and everyone in the congregation is going to wonder where you are, and you start muttering things that are very unministerial, and you're glad no one's paying attention to you up on stage yet. And then you find out it's an accident, and you feel horrible because you're a minister, and you're wondering what happened and to who, and life is just really complex. All the time, whether we're aware of it or not. Just ask bats. Humans like patterns and analogies and symbols, and we very easily store things in categories. And even though it may not be the best thing to do a lot of the time, we tend to label and categorize. It's part of who we are. It helps us keep track of the world around us and manage things in our day-to-day living. But it can also get us in trouble, in big trouble, especially when we disagree on the labels and categories. and complexities. Our tendency to categorize and label causes us to tend toward binary thinking. Ones or zeros, yes or no, true or false, either or. Most of the time, however, we might be better off in terms of thinking of 0 or 1 or 2 or a few at a time, or all of the above. Sometimes we might be better off with maybe than yes or no. Mostly true or partly false. Both and instead of either or. Because this can take us to places that aren't helpful for us. For example, Republicans are fascist, totalitarian bigots that only care about rich people's money. Democrats are fiscally irresponsible communist radicals with a gay agenda and no morals who don't care about America. Drugs are evil, and everyone who uses or sells them is a criminal and should be thrown in jail with the key thrown away. All drugs should be legalized and regulated by a government the way tobacco and alcohol are. Hate speech is just a way to promote a liberal agenda. The First Amendment protects all speech at all times, in all situations, in every context. I can say and do what I want. Hate speech laws are required to protect the most vulnerable among us from persecution, discrimination, violence, and death. All religion is meaningless, infantile fairy tales used to manipulate the ignorant and simple-minded. Religion is necessary to instill a sense of morality in creatures who would otherwise be lawless, murderous savages. Our tendency towards binary thinking makes the false dilemma problem a real issue. The false dilemma is the philosophical argument that presents two options, but in an unbalanced manner, to manipulate the audience, the people who hear or read, listen to the argument, to choose the desired, manipulated toward option. And the way the options are presented makes one choice seem ridiculous, illogical, and unimaginable, and the other sane, ethical, and obvious. You are either pro-life or you are a child killer. You are either a vegan or someone who hates, abuses, and murders animals. You are either for cutting taxes or you are for fiscal irresponsibility. You are either pro-Israel or an anti-Semite. You are either pro-Palestinian or a supporter of apartheid and genocide. You either support dismantling the military-industrial complex or you are a violent warmonger. You either support the troops or you're a traitor to America. You either support reparations for slavery or you are a racist. You can either have the Second Amendment or you can have a society where only bad guys have guns. False binaries. Equally problematic, however, are false equivalencies. There are good people on both sides. Most of the time, this is actually so. But when one side openly advocates dehumanizing others, scapegoating, bigotry, and violence, and the other invites inclusion and participation and peacemaking, in order to have good people on both sides, you've got to have a very interesting definition of good. False equivalencies and false dilemmas lead to us quite often mistaking opinions for ethics. It's just my opinion is a fair thing to reference when you're talking about preferring tea to coffee, or preferring strawberry ice cream to vanilla or chocolate ice cream. You know, an opinion is a lot more intense when it disregards what's right and wrong, and what's fair and not, and what's just and unjust. An opinion is whether or not to call a drinking fountain a bubbler or a drinking fountain. It's a bubbler, by the way. Morality is saying black people can't use that drinking fountain or bubbler. It's a matter of opinion whether or not to call the place with the toilet the restroom, the bathroom, the head, or the john. It's a matter of morality when you start saying only people with certain sex organs when they were born can use this bathroom, toilet, john, or whatever. The falseness of the binaries and the falseness of the equivalencies we can dream up to forge our moral false dilemmas are tricky. And we need to pay attention to the whole landscape of this when we get into this. Assigning restrooms by biological gender is often framed as a false dilemma. Either limit restrooms to biological sex organs assigned at birth, or there will be demented male perverts pretending to be women assaulting and raping cisgendered heterosexual women in bathrooms. Sexual assault is not a joke. Rape is not a joke. Being safe is not a joke. Assuming all the risk is piled on the people who have a non-binary or transgendered identity, however, is immoral. In 2016, ABC News, Time Magazine, the Policing Institute, and other outlets reported that 200 national, state, and local organizations across the country that work with sexual assault and domestic violence survivors objected and published objections to the justifications given by lawmakers in many states to forbid transgender people from using the bathroom of their choice. They asked for support and full and equal access for the transgender community. Data from peer-reviewed studies, such as the one done in 2018 by the Williams Institute at UCLA Law School, shows that trans people do not pose threats in public restrooms, and trans-inclusive restroom policies are not exploited by sexual predators. Trans people, however, are often the victims of assaults in restrooms on a regular basis. Fundamentalism and zealotry thrive on the fact that life is complicated. People seeking understanding and security in a chaotic and uncertain world can easily fall into oversimplistic worldviews that provide easy to understand answers for everything. And frequently, these answers involve dangerous false binaries and false equivalencies. Fundamentalism and zealotry lead to purity thinking and purity culture, where there is no room for deviation from accepted norms, dogmas, or customs. You toe the line. And towing the line starts to have a very fine line between purity culture and totalitarianism. There's an incredibly negligible space between a purity culture where conservative Christians ask young people to make abstinence from sex pledges and pledging loyalty to the dictator because they're the dictator. Penalties for violating purity culture norms include shunning, exclusion, or expulsion from the community. Penalties for being disloyal to the dictator include prison, arrest, torture, and death. It matters what we believe. It matters what our opinions are, and it matters more what our ethics are. It matters what we believe in and how we should behave. Even as we seek to be as inclusive as we possibly can, We need to watch our own tendencies to purity culture and fundamentalisms and binaries and false equivalencies. Let us not promote false binaries or false equivalencies, but rather let us try our best to welcome complexity along with the challenges and adventures and possibilities it brings with it. This morning's reading and the rest of the resources in our session 3 from the Trans Inclusion course point out that there's a wide spread of data and expert opinion and ways to look at the realities of human sex and sexuality and orientation and identity way beyond a simple male-female binary. There's a diagram in your order of service this morning that hopefully gives you a little bit more perspective on the range of things involved here. And that's an illustration by Alex Capitan, who wrote the Bat Story and who will be speaking here from the Transforming Hearts Collective next month. On the surface, sometimes it seems easy to laugh with a conservative lawmaker questioning congressional testimony that mocks someone who says it's not clear-cut what a man or a woman is. And then you take a step back. And then you look just a little bit under the surface. Then you think critically just a smidge. Like our reading pointed out, lots of things to do with human sex and sexuality and gender are not a binary. It's not an either-or situation all the time. In some way, it's not even what we would say is that continuum, right, or a spectrum. It's more like a web with a bunch of experience clustered maybe in one or two places, but that whole web full of things that might be real to someone who's that spot on the web. I believe we seek full inclusion because life is complicated. Being human is complex. Human sexuality and gender and sexual orientation and desire and all the things associated with all of them are complex. I can sympathize with someone who doesn't understand transgenderness or being non-binary. I really can. I understand not understanding things. But I cannot morally accept treating anyone of any gender expression or any orientation or any sex with anything other than full and complete human rights and human dignity and human acceptance and human love. That's the difference between having an opinion about this stuff and having ethics around it. We can't walk away from our ethics and our commitments to justice and our values whenever we don't understand something. Our job is to learn about it so we understand more and have more just, more compassionate, more inclusive, more loving responses to things. That can be a lot of hard work. And it's always worth it. Because one of the things of which I am completely certain in all of this is that there are never just two sides to a story. Check out my website and blog at tonylorenzen.com for even more resources that will open your mind, touch your heart, and inspire your spirit.